Chevrolet presents Oak Creek Canyon, land of the mystic red rock. Deep in the rocky folds of Arizona's Indian country, where sun and sky and steep crags jut into the horizon, is Oak Creek Canyon. This is a place of parched roadbeds that suddenly become swollen with torrential rains that race into lively rivulets to provide sport for the fisherman tourist. It's a place where snow-capped peaks register Arctic temperature, and just 30 miles away is the tropic heat of the lowlands. This skyscraper of stone is nearly 200 million years old. Oak Creek Canyon once was a raging, turbulent sea. Yet as the waters disappeared and earth movements raised the structure of the land, beautiful carvings in stone, like Castle and Bell Rock, appeared out of the depths. Here, the Old West, with its beautiful background, comes to life, and even the most timid of the tourists ventures forth with enthusiasm for that first ride into the hill country. Spanish explorers, viewing this canyon for the first time, named it Verde, the Green Valley. And rising up from it stands the Castle of Montezuma, king of the ancient Indian peoples. The Indians called this spot Tuzagut, Bend in the River. Nestled in the valley is this famous old frontier town of Jerome, whose history was written in the language of gunpowder and six-shooters. You and your family can enjoy the vacation thrills of this fabulous land, and no matter where you live, you can reach it quickly, comfortably, and with the utmost economy. Travel this year the roads to romance, to places you have always wanted to go. And when you travel, go in one of the quality motor cars your Chevrolet dealer has to offer. It will be your magic carpet to the land of your heart's desire.
Hello, and welcome to today's Arizona Hip Historian Happy Hour Tour with Marshall Shore. I am Leslie Watson, the AARP Arizona volunteer. In the month of April, we will focus on fraud prevention by providing specific tools and information to help consumers with knowledge and tools to spot and avoid scams. AARP is a wise friend and fierce defender of consumers. The Fraud Watch Network is here providing free resources that would help you spot scams, get guidance from fraud specialists, and help you feel more secure, knowing we advocate at the federal, state, and local levels to protect consumers and enforce the law. In April, we will launch the Gift Card Scam Initiative and focus on education and awareness against this type of scam. Visit us for resources and information at www.aarp.org/fraudwatch network or at www.aarp.org/AZ. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age, with a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members across the nation and over 900,000 in Arizona. AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to families: health, security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. Now let's have some fun with Marshall.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello, everyone, and good evening. I am so happy that you have joined us on this beautiful, fabulous night here at April 8th. So thank you all so much for being here. Now, I know we have folks, some of you are watching on Facebook, some are watching on YouTube, and even a couple of you watch on Twitch. So again, thank you all so much for being here. So now April 8th is an exciting day because not only is it National Empanada Day, it is also National Zoo Day. And so I hope you all go out when we get a chance and you can support the Phoenix Zoo, which started way back when as the Maytag Zoo. And so it's a pretty cool place if you haven't been. And also on this day back in 1913, right here in Arizona, Tucson passed warnings stating speed laws that limited vehicles to 10 miles an hour in the business district. If you can imagine, I mean, that's probably about the speed of rush hour traffic some days. So, luckily they allow us to go a little bit faster now. So what can you expect on tonight's Arizona History Happy Hour? Now, we've been doing this for over a year now. So we've got all kinds of shows that are archived back on YouTube if you want to go back and watch some of the other shows. Now, we always have a little bit of trivia as well as Little Arizona. We always touch on some Arizona music history, as well as you couldn't have happy hour without a cocktail. And of course, we do a bit of show and tell. So I've got a house full of stuff, and there you go. All right. We also have a very special guest on this evening who I'll bring on in just a few minutes. But I just want to let you, in case you're wondering, who is that man on my screen? What's he doing there? How did he get there? About 21 years ago, I was working in a lovely Carnegie building back in Brooklyn. And it was snowing, it was windy, and I had had enough of all of it. And so decided it was time for a change. So loaded everything we own into a big orange cube, a U-Haul. And so actually traded that library in Brooklyn for the first branch library in the city of Phoenix, which was a 1950s building that wound up being painted hot pink by Will Bruder. I'm happy to say now it is a gorgeous building that is, and I hear libraries are getting ready to start opening up again as kind of our numbers across the state are going down. So looking forward to a chance when I can actually go visit some libraries and do some more research. Now, to get here, we did indeed have to load everything into a big orange cube, a U-Haul. And, when we got here, we promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch. Now, when we got here, it was originally umpteen tones of beige. I'm happy to say now it is a very simplified two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. Now, the house is pretty much a time capsule. If you were to walk into my kitchen right now, it looks just like this. Although, actually, I did clean out my spice rack, so there's a lot less stuff up there. Because, during COVID, it's a good chance to just kind of go through and weed some things out. But all that buttercream yellow tile, the matching appliances like the in-the-wall stove, or the in-the-wall oven, and the matching stovetop with the pushpins inset in the wall. Now, as soon as I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew that wasn't true because every time I went somewhere, I kept coming across so many amazing people, places, and stories. Now, that library that I work in that was in South Phoenix, there was this rich oral tradition of that community. And it got me realizing that a lot of people weren't really talking about that modern history of Arizona. And so that's kind of where I found my niche of talking about those things that not a lot of people were talking about that really made us who we are today. Now, one of the things I always look back and reflect on is that post-war boom. After the war, people were moving here in huge numbers. So all those folks that either had been stationed here, trained here or passed through on their way to somewhere else. They were moving here in huge numbers, looking for a whole new way of life, and some of them were even looking for a house just like mine. Now, my name is Marshall Shore. I'm also known as the Hip Historian. Now, you might wonder, how does one get a name like the Hip Historian? Well, back in 2012, on February 14th, which is an important day here in Arizona, at February 14th, it is Statehood Day. And 2012 was even a larger day. There were events that happened all across the state. And on that February 14th, they held a huge event right in front of the state capitol. And someone gave me 15 minutes on the main stage to talk about anything I wanted to. And I chose to talk about an event called Mask of the Yellow Moon that ran from 1926 to 1955. At its height, it had 5,000 or more students from high school to college, making sure they either were performers or working behind the scenes to make sure that show went off. It was also touted right up there with Mardi Gras that everybody in the country should come and see the Mask of the Yellow Moon. Now, I was able to find 3 dresses from the late 30s. And so I had some lovely friends don those. They paraded around stage showing off these amazing dresses that were designed by Phoenix Union students and made by home economics students. And those dresses are still in amazing shape. Now, that explains a lot of what I was doing before a year ago. I was doing a lot of lectures, tours, things like that, which pretty much came to a screeching halt. And that's why I really started this, because I really missed that sharing. The fact that if I share stories, people share stories back with me. And some of my best material actually comes from just people saying, hey, did you know? Also, we have started doing a second Saturday, a mask haunted history tour of downtown Phoenix. We have one coming up this Saturday that is sold out, but we're debating on next month, depending on where the weather goes from here. Because I don't know if you were out today, but it was a little toasty out there. Now, some of you have already discovered that there is a chat off to the side. Feel free to chat questions, comments in there. After the show, if you would like to reach out to me, you can do that on Facebook, Instagram, email, or even website. Now, the running through all of that is the Hip Historian. So that's pretty much all you've got to remember is hiphistorian.com for my website, and everything else pretty much as well. Now, if you are watching on Facebook, I will ask you to click on that little share button at the bottom of your screen, so that way all your friends will get a chance to see all the fun we're having with Arizona history. Now, we're going to launch into a segment that's near and dear to my heart. So, Little Arizona. So, I talk about moving here from New York, but I don't tell you how I got to New York. I grew up in a small town of about 25 people in the Midwest and moved to New York City, where there were more people on the floor of my apartment building than in my entire town. And so I'm actually right now working on a book called Little Arizona, starting to explore towns across Arizona with some really cool history and trying to keep it to towns under 1,000 folks. And so tonight we're going to talk about Aguila, Arizona, which is actually in Maricopa County. It's about 20 some odd miles outside or west of Wickenburg. It was founded back in 1920 and has a whopping population of just under 800 folks. Now, this area currently, its major economic impacts are cantaloupe farming. Now, it was formerly mining, and as early as 1860s, there were Mexican prospectors out there looking for precious metal. And there even was the Jim Burrow Hotel, which started in the late 40s and got its name because they would loan you a burro to go out into the desert on. And, some of you may know that I love signs. So I did find this sign. Sadly, I think this one is long gone. And There's what it looks like today. I found the signpost, but sadly, no sign. Now, playing up into that mining history, there are over 20,000 active mining claims in the area. Now, this one is the Purple Pansy Mine, where they've mined gold, copper, and magnesium for over 100 years. Now, it also went by other names such as the Fortunate, the Pump, the Blue Hope Mine. So you can see in some ways it's kind of hard to track the history because the names kept changing, and sometimes people would refer to things as something that it was maybe 2 decades ago. So it just kind of makes that a little more complicated. But if you're ever getting a hankering to go and tour something that was actually in Aguila, you can do that from Scottsdale. If you go to the McCormick-Stillman Railroad Park, you can go visit their train depot, which was originally built in 1907 and was then relocated out to the railroad park. So you can tour a little bit of history without having to leave the Phoenix metro area. And you know, it would not be a happy hour without a cocktail. And we've got a really good one for you. So my cocktail guru, PJ, weekly comes up with cocktails that kind of help tell the story of each show. And so he did just that tonight. And so we are having, well, actually, some of you may have noticed my background, that you might even be able to tell where that picture was taken. And so the cocktail for tonight is called the Red and Gold Grandeur. So let's see if I can do this, and we'll bring on my silent bartender. And so basically what he does is he mixes all kinds of ingredients. So here we have a little bit of golden flarinum, some pineapple infused aloe vera juice, a little bit of Casamigos Reposada tequila, some passion fruit liqueur, some strawberry syrup, and as a special kind of little treat, some spiced lotus water. So it really kind of plays up on that mining history, as well as the red rocks of Sedona. And the beauty of what he does is I just have to do this. Now, some days he does challenge me and I have to do more than just that. But today, it's not quite so challenging. And then we'll pop that in right there. And so there you do. You have the Red and Gold Grandeur with a little bit of lotus root floating right in the middle of it. So cheers, everybody. I hope you're having a lovely libation as well. Oh, indeed. He said that I would like that, and I do like that. That's quite tasty. One of the things I love about working with the Valley Ho is that some of our cocktails have actually wound up then on the menu there. So, all right. Nope. Nope, and nobody wants to see him anymore. All right. So through the miracle of modern technology, or maybe not so modern, I mean, that lovely desk phone looks probably about 1968. But Western Electric did cross a TV set with a telephone. So luckily, we're not quite as antiquated as that here today. But I am happy to bring on my friend Wes.
Hey, Marshall, how you doing?
I am good. And yourself?
Doing good. Thank you. Excited to be on your show tonight. We can talk about some great, fun Arizona history and some great stories and stuff that some people probably don't even know about from the state. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. So where are you right now?
Right now, Marshall, I'm actually at my house over in Anthem. I'm not at the Sedona house, but I've been down here on business because I've had a lot of art sales this week. I had to do with a couple of the local galleries on several nice historical paintings, trying to relocate them from a collection and find them new homes.
Ah, very cool. All right. So every week we do trivia. And so basically Wes came up with some really killer questions. And so we do trivia a little differently than what a lot of other places do trivia, is we will go through the questions. They're all multiple choice. So even if you don't know the answer, just guess because, you know, you might get it right. And then we'll take a little bit of an Arizona music history break, and then we'll launch into telling the stories of those answers. So you might not know some of the answers walking in, but you know, when you leave this evening, when you turn your computer screen off, you will know some Arizona history that you likely didn't know before, or maybe more to the story, or maybe you can even add to the story. That's the fun of this because you never know. All right, so let's start off with our first question. So Legend City closed in the early 80s, and that was kind of our Disneyland. Now, the question here is, what happened to all that amusement park stuff? A, was it donated? B, was it auctioned off? C, the family took it all? Or D, it was just left to rot? So you can keep track of your answers. Some folks do it in chat. Some folks do it on a pad and paper. My friend Will did it on his leg and a magic marker. So, you know, whatever makes you comfortable, you go right ahead and do it that way. So what happened to all that Legend City stuff? All right. So on to question 2. Tom Mix, cowboy celebrity, king of the cowboys, would visit Black Canyon City for, did he go for that famous pie that we've all heard so much about? Did he go to visit Jack Swilling's house? C, was it for an affair? Or D, was he staying at a dude ranch up in Black Canyon City? So one of those is a reason that Tom Mix spent a fair amount of time in Black Canyon City. All right, moving on. John Wayne had a custom vehicle. What was it? Was it A, a truck? Was it B, a bus? C, a station wagon? Or D, a tractor? So John Wayne had a highly customized, one-of-a-kind vehicle. And which one of those was it? Fran Elliott, who was up in Sedona, and she collected lots of art, but she collected a unique Arizona type of art. What was it? A, was it landscapes? Was it B, art by children? C, art by women? Or art of trees? What of those did Fran Elliott collect? All right, we're at that midway point. Max Ernst was an artist, and he lived where? Was that in Sedona? A, B, Buckeye, C, Cornville, or D, Bisbee? Where did Max Ernst live? All right, coming up on that downward slope. Soda Springs was a, and in case you don't know the answer, that's why it's a multiple choice. So Soda Springs was A, tobacco farm, B, a dude ranch, C, a cotton farm, or D, a cactus farm? Which one of those do you think Soda Springs was? All right, moving on to question 7. The Jerome House of Joy is across the street from this building. What was that building? A, a gas station, B, a hotel, C, a taxidermy shop, or D, a jewelry shop? So that little space right across the street from the Jerome House of Joy, what was it? All right, coming in for the home stretch. Question 8. Enchantment Resort is built on top of A, sacred burial ground, B, a volcano, C, thermal springs, or D, a Civil War battlefield? The Enchantment Resort in Sedona is built on one of those. Which is it? All right, question 9. Elvis rode a motorcycle in the movie Stay Away Joe. Where is that motorcycle? A, Mormon Lake. B, Lake Montezuma. C, Lake Powell. Or D, Barrett Lake. So which one of those lakes is where that motorcycle that Elvis Presley rode in that movie Stay Away Joe? All right. So we are coming up to the last question of our trivia. What architect designed the cross, the Chapel of the Holy Cross? In case you're wondering what church that is, that would be that church right there. So A, was it Frank Lloyd Wright? Was it B, Al Beadle? C, I.M. Pei? Or D, August K. Trontz? All right. So one of those gentlemen designed the Chapel of the Holy Cross. And so while you're getting your answers ready, we're going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break. Now, because most of what I talk about, I can't get the rights to play. We rarely play music, and pretty much unless I can get the okay from the artist or if it's in public domain. As so, sadly, we don't get to play any music, but tonight we're going to feature a very special place, the Riverside Ballroom. Now, to get to the Riverside Ballroom, you went south on Central, just past the edge of town, almost to the Salt River, and you would be there. Now, it had an open-air dance pavilion that was built around 1914. It also had Arizona's largest swimming pool. Now, remember, this is before air conditioning, so there was no air conditioning in any of these spaces. So the dance hall, no air conditioning. So you can only imagine what it was like in the summer, but people would still flock here. Now, Thursday night, it was basically they had nights that were segregated. So you had Thursday night was black night. Friday night was collegiate night. Saturday night got kind of a name as fight night, because I can only imagine, because as the liquor flowed and people didn't necessarily quite get along, that lots of fights broke out. But then Sunday night was the night for Hispanics. And the folks that would flow through here, everything from Fats Domino, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, you name it, they were pretty much on that stage. Now, Ray Charles did indeed break the house. He had, when he performed there, it was a sellout crowd of 2,000 people. They actually had turned away over 7,000 people. So they knew that it was a pretty big deal. He actually outsold Elvis as well. So, and one of the regulars that would play there was Bob Feet, who actually wound up, he owned it. And so his band, Bob Feet and his Western Playboys, would perform there. And one night back in 1957, Bob got a call that Riverside Ballroom was on fire. By the time he got down there, there were over 2,000 people watching the horrific sight. Now, within a year, he really did rebuild that, and it was a much smaller, more modern space, and it actually survived into the 80s. And one of the things I love is that in this time period of the height of the ballroom, pretty much it was such a huge gathering spot for Hispanics that in the 50s and 60s, pretty much if you were Hispanic and you got married, you likely met your spouse at the Riverside Ballroom. All right. So who is ready for some answers? All right. So Legend City closed back in the early 80s. What happened to all that amusement stuff? B, it was auctioned off. So, Wes, did you go to that auction?
You know, I did have a chance to go to that auction. Marshall, because I was still living in Southern California at the time. But the guy that did go to it, which was really funny, was a bus driver for Metro Bus Lines. His nickname was Sparky. His name was Don, and he ended up buying the house next to him to store his collection. So this guy was a mad hoarder. I showed up on his property, and he had the carousel horses, the bumper cars, the mid-century round sky tram that you used to ride in the sky, which I found out Legend City bought that ride from Pacific Ocean Park in California, the old pier. Remember that closed down? I think, oh boy, that must have closed down in the early 70s. And they had an auction, and they acquired it from Pacific Ocean Park and brought the Skytram to Legend City. And Don ended up buying most of those cars, the rounds like UFO-shaped Skytram cars. And then another guy bought them outside of Casa Grande that was going to open an amusement park, which you've seen that one because
right. And in Tucson, if you look over on on the east side, I'm trying to think when I'm going down.
Right hand side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like you see on the top of these two like telephone poles, there are these gondolas.
I know, it's wild too, and that was part of the Skytram. So that thing ended up in two different directions, one near Casa Grande, and the other ones ended up in this guy's backyard, which is fascinating, So, I mean, little Legend City history. Now, the train ended up, I believe, in Texas. I don't know if El Paso or right around there. But
yeah.
It was acquired by a guy that had a restaurant and an antique shop or something, and is still sitting there to this day with the original Legend City paint and graphics.
Oh.
And here's what's crazy, Marshall. He wants to sell it. So it would be neat if that actually made its way back to Arizona for maybe the Mesa Museum, because Legend City did sit on the borders of Tempe and Mesa,
Right. It was right there where SRP is now.
That's correct. Yeah. So it'd be really fascinating if this train could actually make it back to Arizona, where everybody talks about it and remembers it, and is sad that the thing's rotting away in Texas outside,
Yeah, and I actually knew somebody who was bidding on the lamppost from Legend City and lost them, and they are now at Azteca, which is like a Mexican wedding shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are Legend City lampposts.
That's true too. And then I'm happy to say Zoltan, the famous fortune teller that grants everybody's wishes, is up here in Sedona, Arizona right now. And I've owned him now for, 20 something years, had a lot of offers on people that wanted to buy him, but yeah, he's like family after that long. I couldn't sell him,
So how did you go about acquiring Zoltan?
It took, it literally took, I want to say, almost 10 years, because when Don bought him at the auction, it was his favorite piece, which I understand. He was a star of the arcade, the Penny Arcade there in Legend City, kind of like how Disneyland has Madame Esmeralda, right? The gypsy fortune teller in the front. Legend City had Zoltan. So Don acquired Zoltan. He never wanted to sell it, and years went by. I would make this offer and that offer, and I'll give you this, I'll give you that, or here's this. Oh, no, I don't want to sell it. Well, lucky for me, Don ended up finding a girlfriend. He wanted to go to Hawaii and wanted cash. So it worked out good, Marshall. I was able to buy him. And he's been in the collection ever since. And I know I talked to somebody, Marshall, they did the Legend City Museum exhibit.
Right? Oh, yeah, in Tempe, yeah.
Tempe, well, I guess they were talking about another one down the road or something. And when that one takes place, I'm going to loan out the fortune teller for the museum for exhibit.
Oh my gosh, that'll be wonderful.
Yeah, and I have a lot of other Legend City artifacts too, which I might, even loan that stuff out too, because I have a lot of original production art, concept stuff. I have the original 70s vinyl bags, which I'll give you one because I have a bunch. But they're really cool. They look like an Andy Warhol design for Legend City, which is really wild, So I thought, this park was pretty cool, and you see so many people talk about it and remember it, and there's nothing like it to this day. I mean, we have castles and coasters.
Right. I mean, people talked about how that was kind of there was the curse, the Legend
You're
City
right.
curse, and so that's why we still don't have an amusement park, even though we're the 5th largest city in the country, without a major amusement park nearby.
Now, I heard Metro Mall, right? When Metro Mall, it was talking about getting demolished. Then you had Busch Gardens. We're talking about acquiring it. Magic Mountain, Six Flags, that group.
Oh, wow.
They were talking about acquiring it for an inside park. Mall America was originally going to buy it, but then when all the malls crashed with the internet and everything else, Mall America backed out of that deal. So we'll see what happens on that property too, because Metro Mall is also another historical architect that did design that property. So,
right.
But yeah, real fascinating on all that stuff. But yeah, the fortune teller's been great. I love them. I'm going to probably obtain a Skytram from Don. We've been going back and forth just recently, so we'll see what happens on there. But yeah, I need one of those little mid-century UFOs for the backyard.
Understandable. I don't blame you at all. I would be the same way.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, just great history. Some of the advertising for that park was great. I mean, what was fascinating when you do the history, that park opened up the same time Disneyland opened up in the 50s and was actually at one point Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm's competition, which is fascinating. If you look at Legend City and Knott's Berry Farm, very similar the layouts for those parks. I'm talking about with the train, with the log ride, with the frontier town, the village, and everything else. It was a lot like a Knott's Berry Farm layout.
Well, and also if you've seen any of the original maps, Lewis Crandall, who started Legend City, he actually got asked by Disney staff to send him the plans. And they reworked it. And so I've seen some maps that on the very edge have these blue line drawings that look oh so Disney-fied.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've never seen one of those like outside of a museum.
Yeah,
or outside of Lewis's house. But yeah.
But I mean, the neat thing is a lot of the Legend City stuff is still in Arizona. I mean, I have a couple of the old Mutascope machines. Remember like how Disneyland, Marshall, you put the penny in, you crank in, and it would show you the dancing girl, or it would show you Mark Twain, or let me see right now. I got a couple here at the Anthem House, so we can show some off. Let's see here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, because I mean, as a kid, I used to love, there was a penny arcade. And so, oh my gosh. Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, those ones were operated right there in Legend City. So you can see them, which is fascinating. So I have, tried my best to preserve some of this park or what was left of it at that point, Right. And then Don really preserved it. So I think if we got the train back and a couple of these other guys, we could reconstruct a heck of a museum exhibit, Nice.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
But yeah, that'd be something
to let people know what happened
to see,
It would be very cool to see. I mean, because Legend City was closed long before I got here, but it was one of those first things that people just kept talking about. And when they talk about it, they get all misty-eyed, and multiple generations of families would go there.
I know it was fascinating because I remember that, Marshall, talking to when I first moved out to Arizona, people were talking about this park, and I was like, where is it? And there was nothing there except SRP, but it was still in everybody's hearts and in their minds and their memories, which I find really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing going to the museum. It was like, I mean, even like Vonda K. Van Dyke showed up for the anniversary. They did at the Arizona Heritage Center.
That's true.
So they did like a big 50th anniversary thing that was really cool.
And then also Wallace and Ladmo launched their career at Legend City, you remember?
Yeah.
Yep, that's true. Which was really neat, the Wallace and Ladmo show. So there's a lot of history with that park, and it's fascinating to talk about it. And it'll be fun to see what happens in the future on it, because I've seen a lot of stuff coming back around. Even if you go on eBay, there's tons of people redoing the Legend City t-shirts, bumper stickers, and other old merchandising. So there's still a demand out there for it, which is good, you know?
Yeah, there very much is still a demand for it. So, all right. So let's move on to question 2. So
Boom.
Tom Mix, why would he visit Black Canyon City? It was C, for an affair. Oh my gosh. And one of the most beautiful starlets was why he was going there, not just for pie. But yeah, so he would go there. So tell us a little bit about Tom Mix. Who was he?
Well, Tom Mix, like I said, we're talking what, Marshall, over 140 Western movies. I mean, this guy was like this guy would have been your Elvis Presley of cowboys back there in the day. And I found out he was one of the highest paid cowboy actors with the studios back then, which I know this doesn't seem like much, but in the 1920s, $7,500 a week was a lot of cash, you know?
Right. And the fact that he influenced folks like John Wayne, that he really influenced and was really kind of that whole idea of the black hat, white hat. That's how you could tell the good guy from the bad guy. So that was his doing of some of those iconic things that still survive.
Yeah, it was kind of like a lot of them with that many Western movies. It was like, what would they call them on the history side of it? Kind of like the serial Westerns, Marshall.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he would just put out a whole bunch like that. And there was 144 movies. That's incredible when you think about that. Because a lot of actors you would look at do what? 5, 7, maybe 10, 12 if you're really good. And this guy was 140 plus. So
yeah, I mean, he was just so prolific. Yeah, he was so prolific in the movies that he made. So tell us a little bit about. So being from Indiana, he was famous for that butter cord, or the Duesenberg.
The Duesenberg, which was gorgeous. I mean, we're talking about a Duesenberg back then was like, owning a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. I mean, it was a pricey car, and I mean, very fast engine, really nice Art Deco design. When you look at the other cars from that year and you look at the Duesenberg even had pop-up headlights in the fenders, Marshall. That was
very cutting edge for the time period.
Yeah, that was cutting edge. That was unheard of at that time. And then if you looked at the streamlined body design, it had a major European influence on that kind of body style. Because, when we're talking about during that time, a lot, Henry Ford and the Model Ts were cookie cutter cars. Even the 30s and 40s cars, a lot of them were pretty boxy in design. They were either big round ones like, the Hudsons, the Packards, the Pontiacs. They're either round or boxy. The Cord, beautiful lines. But unfortunately, the Cord would have been where, Tom Mix would end up losing his life coming back from a poker game where he had a trunk full of jewelry, silver coins, and some other stuff. And he slammed on his brakes or overcorrected himself. And that chest ended up hitting and breaking his neck and killing him. And he went into the wash there. And I guess it was Florence, Arizona has a monument for him that is still there to this day. And they named the wash the Tom Mix wash.
Yeah, if you go the back way through Florence to Tucson, which if I have time, I prefer to do that instead of fighting the traffic on the 10. Yeah. It doesn't take that much longer. And so that means I can also stop and look at the Tom Mix Memorial.
I know. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. And this cowboy was quite the womanizer. And the studios kept it under wraps because, of course, he was everybody's favorite cowboy. This was a guy that, you know what I'm saying? He appealed to the families, the kids. It was kind of like how Superman was to the children back then when he acted. You had to
that's a really good point.
You had to portray, Marshall, holy image, or what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
you didn't do nothing wrong. You were perfect. You walked on water or whatever, but he had that little wild side. So he was known, of course, with a lot of the starlets, and right, you could tell him about the one starlet right now he's famous for.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, that was Jean Harlow. I mean, she was
That's
kind of
correct.
like known as being like one of the first like bombshells coming out of Hollywood.
You're right.
And
You're right.
so, I mean, so she is rumored to be spending quite a bit of time in Black Canyon City as well as Tom
That's
Nook.
correct. That's correct. And another place they would, I guess, meet up at was in Prescott also, because Tom Mix had a heavy heart for Prescott. He loved it, So there was a major thing about him and Black Canyon, and also Prescott was fascinated about it. What was really fascinating, where I ended up getting a lot of these facts, because, people talk about it. And of course, you hear rumors or stories passed on. Well, we did an auction with Rich Penn and out of Waterloo, Iowa. And he's one of the Antique Roadshow guys, has a big auction house. And we did the Weber Ranch auction. Me and him did that. And that was back in, I believe, 2011, where we sold off a lot of historical items. But these guys had one of the big Western collections in the United States, including Ed's OK Corral Museum, which was about 300 wagons, stagecoach, buggies, you name it. Well, they also had Tom Mix's collection, because this guy, Tom, that hunted Tom Mix, right, bought all the stuff from the attorney's, I believe it was daughter or cousin or family member that had all that, because Tom Mix willed it to the attorney when he died. So what was in that collection, Marshall, was, of course, his guns, his holster, his safe, his trunk, his little rhinestone cowboy outfits. But the scrapbooks and the journals were amazing, because the journals, Marshall, talked about his love for Jean Harlow.
Wow.
Yeah. And those books were wow. And when we auctioned that stuff off, the person that bought it was really spooky. Said this, Marshall, they said, these books will not see the light. They wanted to protect that image of them. The guy that bought this, multimillionaire, dad and grandfather were Tom Mix fans, and they wanted to protect his image. So it was weird. I said, wow, here we had something that could have been reproduced. We could have took it to the media or did something with it, but instead ended up being protected, which is fine. I mean, I understand that happens a lot in a lot of stuff. When you look in the antique business, in art, in tribal collectibles, ethnic collectibles, other items, people will protect the culture, the history, and sometimes the secrets, which is fascinating. But that's a little rundown on Tom Mix, which I always thought was really fascinating. And it was neat to be able to handle that stuff and look at it.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine what it would have been like to actually like touch things he had touched.
Yes, it was like going back in time. It was really neat, It was really neat because I'll tell you something. The Arizona back in the 20s, 30s was a Wild West still. You know what I'm saying? It was still, I mean, you could look at Phoenix even on the maps, Marshall, there was nothing out there, remember? You had Central and you had, downtown, but you started getting 5, 10, 15 miles out there, there was nothing.
Right. It was nowhere nearly as built as it is now. I mean, you're looking at a population of like 25,000 to 50,000.
Yeah.
So very different than the place what it is now.
Yeah, very cool history on it. I was like really fascinated with that on the whole Tom Mix, the Western movies. Sedona had a ton of Western films. Phoenix had a ton. Apache Junction had some. I mean, every area, there was a lot of Western movies being made.
Right.
Which was really cool for this state.
Right. I mean, we were kind of ground zero for so many of those iconic Westerns.
You're right. And if you think about it, there's not many places that you and I know, especially you will know as a historian that you can even hear about that or see it talked about. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you've got like Museum of the West. I know they have a really cool exhibit up of old movie posters from like the 20s to I think the 30s, possibly the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and they keep rotating those out. I mean, they have like 5,000 that they share with ASU. And so being able to even just see the old graphics.
No, it's fascinating. Totally fascinating. The history on it, the graphics on those posters. Because I mean, you didn't have, you didn't have television or the internet or the media or anything to really plug that. You had to sell them on an image,
Right. You had that one image and that was pretty much your one chance to sell. So it better be a good one.
That's true. Very true. That one image would speak a million words to the consumer,
Exactly. All right. So on to question 3. So John Wayne's custom vehicle was a station wagon, but look at that station wagon. It looks almost like something you would have seen in like one of the Chevy Chase movies.
You're right. I mean the family truckster, Marshall. You know what I'm saying? I mean that thing. You took a look at it. You thought, well, John Wayne obviously, his taste in cars weren't there. Marshall. I'll tell you what's crazy, Marshall. When we had the vehicle parked out in Sedona, I got 3 letters from the HOA to park in the garage. I said to myself, oh my God. I was like, here you got a car that's really rare, but to the HOA, it was an eyesore, It was like, look at this thing. It has these big bullhorns on it. But cool vehicle. Really great history on it, too, on how that was acquired right there. That car came right out of Phoenix here locally. For about 30 years, it was hiding off a Cactus and I think the 51 right over there. It was in a rundown warehouse building with a big gate around it, Marshall. We got back there and I'm talking antique fire trucks, old beat up cars, parts, old Coca-Cola machines rotted out. I mean, it was buried back in there.
Wow.
It was like a time warp of a hoarder, And we got back there and I'll tell you something, the car was hiding back there in a building and all I could see in the dark were round headlights and big bullhorns in the dark. And I said to myself, Marshall, I said, this reminds me of a Stephen King movie, like Christine.
I was going to say exactly.
Yeah, I was waiting to be like a bullfighter with the red, flag and have this Pontiac charge after me. But really cool. So we got it out there. It took about, 5 hours with guys, chains, a flatbed tow truck, and move all these other cars to get it out of there. And we got it back up to northern Arizona, cleaned it up, had the mechanic go through it. And it was really funny, Marshall, because when you open the door, there is probably 2 cents you can't get rid of in a car. If somebody smoked in it, correct, and an alcohol smell. The car smelled like Jack Daniels, tequila, and cigarettes. And it was all original, this car. I mean, the interior still, on the driver's side, still had a big elbow press where the leather was cracked up, where the Duke would lift himself in and out of. And It was, the smell, I said, this must have been John Wayne's favorite car because it still had the reeking smell and nobody had drove it in 30 years. Why I said
wow. Well, but it was actually probably a good vehicle for the ranches, because he had the 2 ranches, so he could just throw stuff in the back of this wagon and go on his way.
It's funny, Marshall, he called it the family stagecoach, right? And I still have in the garage, I don't know what I'm going to do with them, I still have the Arizona historical plates laying in a cabinet for that vehicle. So remember the copper plates? Yeah. Have those.
Wow, for John Wayne's car. That's pretty cool.
The station wagon, yeah.
Nice.
the buyer of the station wagon, I'll tell you, Marshall, you'll get a kick out of it. There was two major players that were bidding on this car. One was Michael Pollock. You know that name?
Oh,
there.
indeed. Yeah.
Major collector, has his own museum. He wanted to buy it for his dad, which was a big John Wayne fan and collector. And he ended up bucking heads with a man named Jimmy Raines from Alabama. And he was a lumber tycoon. So this guy supplied all the lumber to Home Depot, Lowe's, all those guys. They locked heads on the station wagon, and it brought about $100,000.
But the HOA doesn't want it parked in front of your house.
Oh, no, I actually got a fine for that on that car, Marshall. It was hilarious. I said, wow. I said, here we have a historical piece of history, and it got fined for being in the driveway outside, you know. So cool history on the family truckster, correct? Yeah.
Indeed. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. All right.
Yeah, hilarious. That car was pretty cool stories. Really fascinating and fun. I still laugh to this day on that. That thing was really a hoot, that station wagon.
Indeed. All right. So question 4. Fran Elliott collected what unique Arizona art? It was art by Arizona women. So tell us a little bit of who was Fran Elliott.
Okay, well, get ready for this, Marshall. Let me see if I can get the camera on there. Can you see this one right here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a book from the Museum of Northern Arizona, and that's Arizona Pioneering Women Artists. And that book is the Fran Elliott collection, which is really fascinating, you know? So the neat thing was I was really good friends with Fran and Ed for, 20 plus years. When I first moved out to Sedona, I was working doing art appraisals, and I met Fran. She was an art appraiser, big collector and socialite, you know, and I met her and we became really good friends, and she amassed probably one of the biggest art collections of women artists, pioneer women artists of Arizona, because nobody was doing it, Marshall. I mean, every other place, California had a women's art collection. Washington had one. Oregon had one. New Mexico had one, you know, with the Taos movement and all that. And their artists. Right. Arizona did it. So she made sure to track this stuff down. And the last 40, probably 30, 40 years, she was buying this stuff all over the state, chasing down old Arizona families, chasing down artists, descendants, museums that had to liquidate stuff because they needed funds, and other stuff that was coming to the market. She was able to amass this collection, which was amazing. And the art collection, she had a lot of other major artists too, besides women artists, but the end number of paintings was probably, 1,200 or more? Maybe
wow.
More. It was crazy. And I saw a lot of stuff that really blew my mind. And I've dealt in fine art here in Arizona, up here in Sedona now, going on 20 plus years. So I've had, a lot of great pieces, and I brokered a lot of great items from collections. But the Elliott collection is amazing. The neat thing is we are able to keep all the Arizona pioneer women artists, this collection intact. And
that's great.
It's going to a museum in Scottsdale. It will be on exhibit there, and everybody will be able to view it and see it. And you can see in the book right there, you'll see a lot of the, paintings from that collection, which is fascinating. And I'm glad to see that intact. Now, of course, with any estate, you have a trustee and you have heirs. So the rest of the art, Marshall, is being sold. And coming up in June, EJ's auction in Glendale, Eric Hoyer, very good friend of mine, will be doing the Elliott art collection right there. And there's going to be a Thomas Moran in that sale with all of its provenance, which is hard to see. This Thomas Moran painting is of the Borax mine. You know the Borax mine.
Oh, yeah.
The Mule Tape mine. And it was one of the few Thomas Moran did with two cowboys on a horse going down the mine trail with ore carts and everything. And Moran painted that one. I'd have to check. I believe it was about 1907 or right around.
Wow.
Okay. And the cool thing about this painting is it was exhibited in the Phoenix Art Museum back like in the 70s or 60s. It still had the old label on there. And it also had the label from the Pasadena Art Museum in California and its original catalog that showed that painting in that museum on exhibit. So we have a Moran with a lot of provenance heading up for auction. There's a Max Ernst in the sale and a ton of other women Arizona artists, men artists, you name it, just really good pieces. And there also will be an estate sale in Sedona at their Frank Lloyd Wright house, the winter solstice, which will be coming up in a month right there, which I'm glad you'll be coming up to check it out. You can do a segment and talk about a lot of stuff because there's a lot of cool historical pieces and stuff that people will really enjoy seeing. And you're our hip historian, so definitely you're the guy for the job, Marshall. You know?
Well, I look forward to seeing some of it. I mean, it's like, one of the reasons why when we were putting this together, I chose this Jessie Benton Evans because she played such a role in Arizona. I mean, her son, Robert T. Evans, who was an architect, builder of the Jukaki Inn, the Eisendrath House out near Papago Park. Mm-hmm. So, did some amazing stuff. So I love how just that one name, you can launch into so many different bits of history about it.
Oh, you can. And the whole history, especially of the women artist movement in Arizona, is fascinating. You had women artists painting the landscapes here in the early 1800s, Marshall. People would have thought of that. You would have thought women living, taking care of the family and doing stuff like that. You would have thought of her being an artist back then, but there was a lot of great women history here in Arizona in the art movement that people didn't know about here happening, and I'm glad to be preserved. It's going to be exhibited, and it's great for that, for generations to see how strong the women art movement was here in Arizona.
Right.
And
so,
kept it together, which was good. And there was a lot of stuff with some of the family wanted to sell this and that. The will stayed intact. Everything went good. It got donated, and it will be exhibited for future generations to see.
Very good. And keep that history alive. All right. So question 5. Max Ernst was an artist and he lived in Sedona. Shock.
Oh, Marshall, what a guy. If you want to talk about an artist, right? This guy was like, I'm going to say the Salvador Dali of Sedona back then.
Oh, very, very much so. I think that's a very apropos.
Very eccentric and wild. He had outfits, I've seen him in, outfits, Marshall, that outdid your outfit.
Oh, man. I need to see more photos of this man. I have aspirations now.
I know. This guy was doing this in the 40s. He was super avant-garde, wild, head of his time. And, the paintings are like, you look at them and it's like something from outer space, moon terrain, these landscapes. And these were red rock paintings of Sedona and different areas in Sedona. And his sculptures were really wild. Just so cool. Just stuff you couldn't even see. And Fran and Ed collect Max Ernst, And we have the Sedona Sunset painting, which is a smaller scale painting. It's a small one, but it will be going up for sale at EJ's auction. And it's out of a great collection, great history on that, so that'll be neat to see that piece going up for sale. And you're the first person, Marshall, to show it because EJ's PR campaign doesn't even start till about another week or two.
Oh, so people are getting a little bit of a preview of coming soon.
Yeah, the neat thing with Max Ernst is, he was in Sedona from 1943 to 1957, so we had him here for a while. And he lived with Dorothea Tanning, which was another artist, very good artist. So you had two artists there living together. And, you know, it was hard. 40s and 50s wasn't the art scene for Sedona, Marshall. You
Right.
know, so a lot of his paintings and work, they had to trade with like the Babbitts for lumber, or the local grocery store, or the milk guy, or the hardware store, and stuff like that. Now, I'll show you one in the personal collection, Marshall, because I go crazy with this stuff, right? So, yeah.
No,
So,
that's why I was like, Wes, I want you on, so that way you can show some of those little gems.
okay. Can you see this?
Oh, wow.
That is Jerome, Arizona. Okay. That was done in 1951 by Max Ernst.
Wow.
So I have one in my collection. You know that? And the crazy thing is, I'll tell you how I acquired that painting, Marshall, which is insane. When I had my store up in Jerome, which we'll get into that later, right?
Indeed.
I had an old man walk in the store and said, "Do you want a painting of Jerome?" And I said, "I love it." I said, "I love Arizona history." He goes, "Well," he goes, "I think in the 50s we paid $10 for it. So you could have it for $100. I looked up a name, Marshall. I said, "It's a Max Ernst." I said, "I can't give you $100. I said, "Let me broker it for you." He goes, "I don't want it. My wife, the last 30, 40 years, said that's the ugliest painting of Jerome she's ever seen." So he lifted up the store, Marshall, $100, and I've owned it ever since.
Wow.
And you can always tell Max's colors. He was so far out there on the stuff. You know what I'm saying? He played a lot on the colors. He liked to shake it up, different designs, and wasn't what I called a cookie cutter artist, you know? Very fascinated artist. It's great to see his stuff. It's hard to see his stuff. I mean, if you would have got into this stuff in the 70s and 80s, it was still really cheap. 90s, Marshall, early 90s, it started climbing up. By the time we got into late 90s, 2000, the cheapest Max Ernst painting was about, at Bonhams or any of the auction houses, $235,000, $400,000. Bigger paintings went up to several million. Bronze sculptures he did of like the Picasso type modernist abstract figures can go upwards of $8, $10, $12 million, which is insane.
Wow. That's amazing.
But a lot of his price influence was with the mid-century collectors and that movement. They sought his prices through orbit, you know?
Right.
So it kind of gives you a rundown on his art and how different trends and styles and baby boomers and different generations will affect that business. You know, because there's some art you can't give away anyway more, Marshall, because the generation has passed away or they no longer collect it.
Right. Oh, yeah, very much so. I mean, all kinds of things like that. All right. So let's go on. Question 6.
All right.
Soda Springs was what? It was a dude ranch.
Yes, it was. And I'll tell you, the fascinating thing on Soda Springs was this was the dude ranch to the stars. Because for Hollywood back then, a lot of people like Clark Gable and those guys wanted to go play cowboy and wanted to get out of Hollywood. They would come up to Arizona. And a lot of them wanted to go, you know, kind of play on the dude ranch, but didn't have the responsibilities. You know what I'm saying, Marshall? So they could go on there and get nice little bungalows out there on the creek, you know, get the campfire going, tell stories, play guitars, music, listen to the coyotes howl with the landscapes, with the stars out, and just fascinating how many people actually stayed at that dude ranch. I mean, it goes on forever and ever and ever. And the neat thing is on this dude ranch was it ended up getting purchased by, I believe it was a Wrigley family, and it got fully restored, Marshall. But they keep it as a private residence, which is sad because nobody can come and visit it. But it's been restored, and it had all its original Monterey furniture in it, which was like walking back into 1950,
Yeah, no, that would be amazing to see, because I mean
Fascinating
that Monterey furniture is beautiful.
That's gorgeous. Some of the designs on it was like, wow, when you saw it, it still has the right design and style to this day, which is great.
Right.
But yeah, fascinating dude ranch. And like I said, it was another landmark, and it was located in Lake Montezuma. When you got off the Lake Montezuma exit, there was a dirt road, and on the way to Lake Montezuma's well, the famous well down there, Marshall,
Yeah.
right? There's a dirt road off to the right that says private residence, stop, no entry. And that's where Soda Springs is located, on the right.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's hidden back there, which is really neat. And if you ever get a chance to talk to the family or the caretaker, to view that property and see it firsthand is amazing. I mean, a beautiful architectural design. I mean, very cool. Very cool. We're talking like Ranch House, Arizona, 1930s,
Wow, very cool. All right. So question 7. The Jerome House of Joy is across the street from an early gas station.
Oh, I know. And wow, Marshall, the stories we could tell on this one, right? Wow. Okay. So me and my partner, Tom, at the time, we were opening another store. So we said, okay, let's do one in Jerome. It'll be fun. Because we have, the Native American kachinas. We have the old cowboy stuff, some of the vintage Western, the cigar store Indian, the whole 9 yards. So
Right.
I'm like, this will be a fun store to do that. So we signed the lease on the building on it and got a really smoking deal on it, and then ended up selling the business later. But the funny thing goes on it was when we were setting it up, Marshall, the right side of the store, we put these shelves up there, heavy duty shelves, displayed all the kachinas on them. Every morning, Marshall, 1 or 2 kachinas would be on the ground.
Oh my.
I'm like, what is this? And so, of course, I have to do the MacGyver scientific thinking and think, well, this has to be explained. Jerome was built on mines. There's mines underneath it. The ground shifts X amount of inches and da-da-da-da-da. So we went with that theory. Next day, on the ground. On the ground the next day. Finally, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, what's going on here? This is really weird. Well, we had the granddaddy of all come day 5. Day 5, they're all on the ground, Marshall.
Ooh.
So I'm like, okay, so 2 or 3 would fall off the shelf. Now 40 fell off the shelf. Now, if you know kachina dolls, they're made out of wood and very fragile. So I'm having broken kachinas all the time. And it's unexplained. So I said, okay, we're going to move the shelves. We're going to move something else. Then I said, hell with it. We're getting a surveillance system in here. So I put these motion cameras in because I wanted to see what the hell was going on, because I'm about as skeptical as it gets on stuff. So I said, we'll get motion cameras in here. Lo and behold, shortly after, the camera's moving around because it picks up motion and movement. It stops on this antique clock, Marshall. The hours sign on the clock is going around in circles, like spinning, kind of like it's a contest or something, with a little arrow spinning around on the prize wheel on the clock.
Oh
Yeah, so the camera caught that, and I said, that's weird. Something has to be moving that, So I'm like, okay, I don't want to believe in the ghost story theories, but it's leaning more and more to that direction there, So,
Well, they do call Jerome the most haunted place in Arizona.
You're right. And the granddaddy of all, Marshall, which I'll pull that image and you can post it online later for the show segment, was one night the camera picked up 2 white shadow images, like white, almost see-through hologram images, but you could make them out of like a Victorian woman in the big dress with the big hat and outfit, and kind of a cowboy man with a nice dress cowboy hat wearing a period outfit, but it was white and it was like see-through, which was weird. And the camera picked it up, and it locked on that image for about 10 minutes.
Wow.
And we have that footage and image. I've sent that image out to some of the local paranormal investigator groups and investigators, this and that, and people that are in that field and that, which I eventually got into that field myself because I figured if you can't beat them and you can't explain it, you might as well join them, which was fun because, there's a lot of great history. I mean, we did the ghost tour hunt up in Ajo, Arizona, the old hospital, Marshall.
Oh, yeah.
And that place was active as heck, with all
I
the
would believe
equipment and that. A lot of good history. And the Ajo Hospital is the sister to the Jerome Hospital.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, they're both owned by Phelps Dodge, right? But
Right.
here's
Okay,
what's
that makes sense.
fascinating. That hospital in Ajo's for sale for like $300,000. 50,000 square foot architectural building on a mountain stands by itself. Now, if you went to buy the Jerome one, Marshall, it'd be $8 million or $6 million.
Right.
So probably a good investment if somebody wants to open up a haunted hotel up there.
Yeah.
I could totally see somebody doing that, but fascinating. Jerome, great history. I know you've done stuff up in Jerome and have been really fascinated with it.
Very much so. I mean, it's an amazing place.
I know, just really cool. And it's just really fascinating to see the history there. And they took care of the history, which was neat.
Right. Exactly. I mean, from the moment it started slowing down, they realized, hey, we should preserve this.
Yeah, you're right. And one thing you'll notice in Jerome, you won't see a Starbucks, Marshall, or any of the corporate chains. They don't let them in.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so the historical committee up there has done an amazing job on keeping everything up to code and keeping it preserved.
All right, so let's move on to question 8, which is Enchantment Resort in Sedona is built on top of what? A sacred burial ground. Well, how did that happen?
Well, here's what happens. When Enchantment was first built, it was built by a famous tennis pro, okay? And I believe it was Gardner on that resort. I'll have to see. Well,
that makes sense.
Yeah, he built it as a famous tennis resort and that. Well, back in those days, Marshall, zoning and stuff was a lot of payoffs and, they wouldn't send down, let's just say, a museum team to excavate, like archaeologists, to excavate to see if it was burial grounds or sacred grounds or grounds that shouldn't be disturbed. Well, of course, lo and behold, it was built on burial grounds down there. So there was a lot of ruins and caves and pot charts and bones that were found out there. And that's been a real sore subject, which they kept it under wraps. But if you research it, you'll see it all over the internet. And the Native Americans have actually fought really hard on that. I mean, they ended up getting Poco Diablo. The Yavapai Apache owns Poco Diablo Resort in Sedona. That's one of their properties. And it won't amaze me if eventually when Enchantment goes for sale, they'll acquire it back.
Okay.
Because that's been a really sore subject for a long time on that.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So they definitely, probably want their property back, and I don't blame them on that. That was their homestead there, and then you had a hotel resort built on it. But there's a little Arizona history and Sedona history that not many people want to talk about,
Right. Understandable. And so I'm glad we're now talking about things like that.
Yeah, it's just preserving the history like you do, preserving the history.
And those stories, which are so important.
And making sure people remember it so it is passed on for generations and for people to, know about the state they live in.
Indeed. All right. So question 9. So in Stay Away Joe, Elvis rode a motorcycle. Where is it?
Here's the fun part. It is still in Lake Montezuma. A lot of the stuff that was made for that film still is up here in northern Arizona, different locations. And the motorcycle ended up in Lake Montezuma for a guy that I guess was running around with Bradshaw that had the old Western town up there a long
Oh,
time
yeah.
ago, where they
Yeah.
did movie filming. It was another cowboy ended up with the bike. The bike ended up in Lake Montezuma, and I've been trying to buy it ever since. Marshall. Yeah. So this has been going on like a saga or a trilogy. So we'll see what happens. But I really like chasing down the history, and it's always fun to acquire it and pass it on to someone else and let it tell
Well,
another.
and so much of it is the hunt.
It's a hunt. I mean, to look at it, I wake up every day and I say, wow, I get to play Indiana Jones, Marshall, which is fun.
Right.
Some people go to their job at an office or a bank or somewhere else, and you have to stay behind a computer and a desk. I get to go out in the field and meet some fun people, hear crazy stories, end up in remote locations, throw in a ghost or two. It's kind of like a Scooby-Doo mystery, which is really fascinating. I mean, you look at it, you're like, oh my God, what a hell of a business to be in,
Indeed. All right. So we have one last question, and it is question 10. What architect designed the Chapel of the Holy Cross in Sedona? In case you question which is the Chapel of the Holy Cross, it is that building right there. That's pretty hard to miss in Sedona. I mean, it's famous architecture. And it was August Trontz. His other famous building was the Lawrence Hall of Science out in Berkeley, that is touted to be like one of the best designs in San Francisco, and is like on an architect's list, places they have to go visit.
I know you're talking. I mean that particular church design. You're talking mid-century design at its finest.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that it is still original and that you still can go into it is pretty amazing.
And the engineering on it, when you talk to people on it, Marshall, was near to impossible on that design to do that.
Right.
You're talking just crazy engineering to be able to build that into the rocks like that and have it sit perfect, and the foundation never shifted or anything on that design.
And it doesn't leak.
No, it doesn't even leak. So yeah, great building. And yeah, another great landmark. And it's good that building will be preserved and taken care of for generations to see hundreds of years from now.
Exactly. All right. So now is the time where we kind of ask everyone, it's like, well, how did you do? I mean, some of these questions, there's some great stories attached to them. That's kind of the beauty of this, is that we really get to launch into some Arizona history that not everybody knows. You're not going to wind up seeing this in a lot of other places. So I really want to say thank you to Wes for coming on and sharing.
Thank you,
and
Marshall.
I love seeing the things in your own collection. I mean, that Max Ernst of Jerome is breathtaking.
I know. I mean, Marshall, you follow me on Facebook. You see all the crazy adventures and the stuff that we get into and buy and sell. And it's a great business. I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it is so much fun. So thank you for coming on and sharing your stories. And I mean, and also even that Cinescope from Legend City. I mean, I grew up going to penny arcades, loving those things.
I know, it's wild. It's fun. It's such cool history on it. And it brings back, so a lot of people look at it, and what's fascinating, it brings back such great memories for people, like their eyes sparkle up like they're a little kid again,
Oh, right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I always say, if I can do that in my business, then it's worth doing,
Very much so. All right, Wes. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your night.
And Marshall, we'll look forward to seeing you up in Sedona soon.
We'll make that happen.
Take care, buddy. Have a good night.
You do the same. Oh my gosh, wasn't that fun? I love the stories. So you might have been wondering, should I share initially? Well, now you see why, you really should, because you get to hear great stories from Wes like that. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm looking forward to getting a chance to go up and see some of that artwork face to face. So, all right. So now we're moving off to Wes has already done this show and tell. He showed us some great stuff. And so we are going to talk a little bit about Saguaro Savings and Loan. And so I actually in prepping for the show, I actually realized I forgot it's still sitting on the shelf, but and my green screen. So it's a little cactus bank. Oh, if we kind of do that. So it's a cactus bank, and it was back in the time period where banks would give you all kinds of incentives to get a savings account to start doing business with them. And so Saguaro Bank actually started in the early 70s. It then became part of Western Savings and Loan in the early 80s. And then by the mid 90s, it got acquired along with Western Savings and Loan by Bank of America. So some of those branches are still around and in those original buildings. I mean, I love the fact that you can go around and still see so many original bank buildings around the valley. I mean, probably one of the most famous is over there on Camelback and 40th Street, we like to call it the Fred Flintstone Bank. So there is all kinds of great history here. So coming up next week, I'm really happy to say we have Buffalo Jump Records. And so they are doing contemporary Native American or indigenous musicians and recording those. And so Stephen's going to come in and talk about some of the stuff they're doing. So it's going to be so much fun to have Stephen talking about some of the stuff they've been doing, some of the stuff he's done in the past. He used to work with Canyon Records. So that's going to be a really great show as well. I mean, I just love all these stories that so many of them you're only going to get from the one person who's sharing them. And so now remember, if you have any comments, suggestions, or people you think might be good on Happy Hour, let me know. Because again, I really enjoy that give and take. I mean, that's the fun of doing this show, of really getting to hear from some of you. I mean, some of you remember going to Legend City. Some of you had station wagons. I personally hated sitting in the back seat going backwards. I have a big going backwards phobia thing. So, but we won't go into that anymore here. So remember, you can always reach out to me. You can do that on Facebook, which is Marshall Hip Historian. Instagram is Hip Historian. Or email is hello@hiphistorian.com. So we have a tour coming up on Saturday. We're actually looking at doing one the following month in May as well. I will let everyone know as soon as that is a go. And so thank you all so much for being here. I always love to say thank you to AARP, as well as my friends Cole and Travis, who did that amazing intro video. And, you know, it wouldn't be Happy Hour without PJ throwing together some amazing ingredients to tell a story. And as we say good evening, I'm going to leave you with Mr. Ho, who is an orchestra. He grew up in Sunny Slope, now out on the East Coast. And as Arizona gets ready, in a couple of weeks, we are going to be celebrating Arizona Tiki Oasis over at the Valley Ho as well. And so that's going to be a fun event as well. So we're going to hear some of Mr. Ho's music as well as film footage. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night and an amazing week.